The family trip that was supposed to bring a smile to everybody's face turned those smiles into something far more sinister. I do hope that today's story will put a smile on your face. The sun was setting over the picturesque suburb of Maplewood as the Miller family car, laden with suitcases and memories, pulled into the driveway of the cozy two-story house. It had been a week since the Millers had ventured off on their spontaneous vacation to an old, almost forgotten town nestled deep in the mountains. The town, with its cobblestone streets and ancient architecture, was like a step back in time, a perfect escape from the bustling modern life of Maplewood. Mark and Linda Miller, sitting in the front seats, shared a glance of contentment, their smiles almost too perfect in the fading light. In the back seat, Emily, 12, with her nose buried in a book, and her younger brother Josh, 10, playing a game on his tablet, seemed oblivious to the subtle changes in their parents. The house welcomed them back with a familiar creak and groan as Mark and Linda began unloading the car. With mechanical efficiency, the children rushed inside, eager to return to the comfort of their rooms. Emily's room was a sanctuary of books and drawings, a stark contrast to Josh's world of action figures and space posters. Dinner that night was a quiet affair. Mark and Linda chatted about mundane things, their voices carrying a strange, melodic tone that Emily couldn't quite place. Josh, usually chatty, was unusually silent, his eyes darting between his parents. Later, as Emily lay in bed, she thought about the trip. There had been something off about that town. The locals, with their stiff postures and vacant smiles, had unnerved her. She remembered a chill run down her spine as she passed an old photograph in the town's inn, the faces smiling in a way that seemed almost predatory. As sleep began to claim her, she heard her parents moving around downstairs. Their footsteps were too synchronized, the sound too crisp. A faint whisper of unease settled in her heart. It was probably nothing, she told herself, just the remnants of a long drive and an overactive imagination. But deep down, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed them home from the strange town. Something that was now living under their roof, wearing the faces of her parents. In the dead of night, the house seemed to breathe with a life of its own, the shadows stretching and twisted in a pale moonlight. Emily drifted into a restless sleep, unaware of the two figures standing motionless in the hallway outside her door, their smiles never wavering, their eyes empty of warmth. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow over the Miller household. The normalcy of the morning routine was comforting, yet Emily couldn't shake off the eerie feeling that had taken root in her mind. As she descended the stairs for breakfast, she noticed her mother, Linda, meticulously aligning each utensil on the table, a level of precision that was uncharacteristic of her usually relaxed demeanor. "Good morning, Emily," Linda said, her smile never reaching her eyes. "Could you please bring down the family photo album from the attic? Your father and I would like to reminisce about our trip." The request seemed harmless, but it struck Emily as odd. They rarely looked at old albums, and her parents' newfound interest in family memories felt out of place. Nevertheless, she agreed, curious to see if her unease had any merit. Josh, still quiet, picked at his breakfast, casting wary glances at their parents. Mark was reading the newspaper, but his movements were stiff, his laughter at a comic strip sounding forced and hollow. After breakfast, Emily climbed to the attic, a place of dust-covered memories and long-forgotten treasures. She found the album buried under a pile of old blankets. As she flipped through it, a sense of nostalgia washed over her, but then her fingers paused on a page. There, amidst the family photos, was a picture from their recent trip. Her parents stood in front of an old ancient oak tree, their smiles too wide, too unnatural. Descending the stairs, album in hand, Emily's thoughts were interrupted by her father's voice. "Emily, Josh, we've decided to renovate the house. We need you both to sort through your things. Anything old or unnecessary should be discarded. Now we're going to have a short scare break while you ease your nerves. So while you're waiting, don't forget, if you're enjoying the content, go ahead and stab that subscribe button right now. As doing so, you'll really help the professor spread his shadow of evil. Now, let's get back to the story." Renovate? Since when had they planned this? Their house, with its cozy charm and lived-in feel, had never needed a makeover. The request felt as bizarre as her mother's earlier that morning. Throughout the day, Emily and Josh found themselves complying with a series of peculiar demands. Linda asked Emily to part with a cherished collection of childhood storybooks, claiming they needed to make space for the new. Mark instructed Josh to throw away his beloved action figures, stating they were clutter. As the sun began to set, Emily and Josh met in the safety of their room. They spoke in hushed tones, sharing their growing suspicions. Their parents' behavior was not just odd, it was unsettling, methodical, as if they were following a script. "Did you notice their smiles?" Emily whispered. "They never change even when they're upset." Josh nodded, his eyes wide with fear. "And they keep talking about making everything new, as if they want to erase our past." Determined to understand the truth, Emily suggested they search the attic for more clues. Maybe there was something in those old photographs, something they had missed, that could explain the bizarre transformation of their parents. As night enveloped the house, the two children crept back to the attic, unaware of the two pairs of eyes that followed their every move, the smiles never faltering, the intentions hidden behind a facade of normality. The attic was dimly lit by a single flickering bulb, casting long shadows across the dusty floor. Emily and Josh rummaged through boxes and old furniture, seeking any clue that might explain their parents' strange behavior. The air was thick with the musty scent of forgotten years. As they sifted through a box of old newspapers and documents, a creak from the stairway startled them. Their hearts raced as the steps grew closer. The sound, methodical and precise, Emily quickly hid behind an old wardrobe, pulling Josh with her. Peeking through a crack, they saw their parents enter the attic. Mark and Linda looked around, their expressions unchanged. "The children are curious," Mark said in a flat tone. "We must be careful." "They will adopt to the changes," Linda replied, her voice equally devoid of emotion. The siblings exchanged terrified glances. Their parents' conversation was cryptic, but it was clear they were aware of Emily and Josh's suspicions. After a few moments of searching, Mark and Linda left the attic, their steps retreating down the stairs. Once they were sure their parents were gone, Emily and Josh emerged from their hiding spot. "We need to find out what's going on," Emily whispered. "Something's really wrong here." Later that day, Emily noticed her parents talking to the neighbours across the street. The Johnsons were a friendly couple who had always been kind to the Miller children. But today, something was off. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson wore the same eerie, unchanging smiles as Mark and Linda. Their movements were stiff, their laughter forced. Emily tugged at Josh's sleeve, pointing out the window. "Look, Josh, the Johnsons! They're acting like Mum and Dad." Josh's eyes widened as they watched the scene unfold. The four adults conversed in the Johnsons' front yard, their expressions unnaturally cheerful. "This is too weird," Josh said, a hint of fear in his voice. "First Mum and Dad, now the Johnsons." Emily bit her lip, deep in thought. Maybe it's not just our parents. Maybe whatever happened to them is spreading. The realization sent a shiver down their spines. The children knew they were facing something far beyond their understanding, something that threatened not just their family, but their entire neighborhood. As night fell, Emily and Josh huddled together in her room, discussing their next move. They needed answers, and they needed them fast. The thought of their parents, once warm and loving, now cold and distant, filled them with dread, and the Johnsons' transformation only added to the growing sense of urgency. "We need to find out what happened during that trip," Emily said, determination in her voice. "Whatever started this, it's connected to that place." Nodding in agreement, Josh added, "And we need to be careful. If Mum and Dad know we're onto them, there's no telling what they're going to do." As they devised a plan to uncover the truth, the house around them seemed to creak and groan more than usual, as if echoing their fears and uncertainties. The once familiar walls now felt like a prison, holding secrets too sinister to comprehend. Josh and Emily, hearts pounding with a mix of fear and determination, crept towards the front door. They had agreed it was time to seek help outside their neighborhood, to find someone who could make sense of the bizarre transformations happening around them. As they slowly opened the door, a blood-curdling scream pierced the evening air. They froze, looking out to see Tony Johnson, the young boy from across the street, bolting out of his house. His face was twisted in terror as he shouted, "You're not my mother! Leave me alone!" Emily and Josh watched in horror as Mr. Johnson, with the same eerie, unchanging smile, calmly followed Tony. He said in a soothing yet unsettling voice, "No!" Tony screamed, struggling as his father grabbed him. "You're not my father! Help me!" The siblings' eyes darted down the street, hoping to see a neighbor, anyone, react to Tony's pleas. But what they saw chilled them to the bone. Every family on the street was standing on their doorsteps, watching the scene unfold. Each face bore the same unnerving smile, their eyes empty of genuine concern. Realizing the gravity of their situation, Emily and Josh quickly retreated inside. The neighborhood was no longer a safe haven. It had become a prison of smiling faces and hidden horrors. "We need to help Tony," Emily whispered urgently. "He seems to be the only one who's left." As the commotion outside quietened down, they made a daring plan to sneak out to Tony's house. The backyards provided some cover, allowing them to move unseen. Reaching Tony's house, they crouched in his back garden, hearts racing. Emily picked up a small stone and tossed it gently at Tony's window. The window opened, and Tony's face appeared, his eyes wide with fear and confusion. "Tony, we're going to get you out of here." "What?" Emily began, but Josh suddenly grabbed her arm, cutting her off. Tony's expression had changed. His face now mirrored the same eerie smile that had been seen on the adults. It was a chilling transformation, his youthful features contorted into an unsettling grin. "Let's get out of here," Josh said, pulling Emily away. They retreated quickly, the realization sinking in that Tony was no longer the ally they thought he was. Back in Emily's room, the siblings sat in stunned silence. The neighborhood was lost, each family succumbing to whatever sinister force had taken hold. Their own parents, the Johnsons, and now Tony. It was spreading, and they were running out of options. "We can't trust anyone," Josh said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Whatever this is, it's taking over everyone." Emily nodded, a mix of fear and resolve in her eyes. "We need to leave Maplewood, find help, find out what's causing this and how to stop it." As they began to plan their escape, the night outside grew darker, the smiles of the neighbors casting long, ominous shadows across the streets of what was once a peaceful suburb. The danger was closer than ever, and time was running out. The tension in Emily and Josh's room was palpable as they sat, huddled together, plotting their next move. The door suddenly swung open, revealing their parents standing in the doorway, their smiles unchanging, unnaturally wide. "It's time to come downstairs," they said in unison, their voices eerily calm. Emily and Josh exchanged a glance of sheer terror. They knew all too well what this invitation meant, a transformation into whatever their parents had become, a fate they were desperate to avoid. "Who are you and why are you doing this?" Emily demanded, her voice trembling. "We know you're not our parents," Josh added defiantly. Their parents simply looked at each other before turning back to the children. "Soon you will not care. You will have no worries and have a single purpose," they said. "Now come downstairs." Reluctantly, Emily and Josh stood up and followed them. As they reached the halfway point of the stairs, Josh whispered, "Now!" In a split second, they charged past their parents, bolting towards the front door. The door flung open and they sprinted down the street. To their horror, as they ran, every door on the street opened. The residents, all bearing the same creepy smile, began to chase after them. Screams and shouts filled the air as the neighbors pointed and yelled at the fleeing children. Looking back, Emily and Josh saw their parents, the Johnsons, and even Tony run in with the rest of the crowd. Their faces were twisted into a grotesque smile, their eyes devoid of any warmth. As they reached the end of the street, a group of smiling neighbors blocked their path. Without hesitating, Emily shouted, "Split up! You go left, I'll go right! Meet me at the park!" With that, they veered in opposite directions, narrowly evading the grasp of their once friendly neighbors. Their hearts pounded in their chests as they navigated the twisted maze of Maplewood streets, each turn a gamble between safety and capture. Josh darted down alleyways and jumped over fences, his mind racing with fear and determination. Emily, on the other hand, sprinted through backyards and side streets, her breath ragged, but her resolve unbroken. The once familiar neighborhood had turned into a nightmarish landscape, with every smiling face a reminder of a horror that had befallen the community. The siblings knew there was only one chance of survival: to regroup and find a way out of Maplewood, away from the sinister force that had transformed their world into a living nightmare. Josh's heart raced as he ran, evading capture with a mixture of luck and desperation. Behind him, the sounds of pursuit faded into the distance. He managed to escape, but his mind was consumed with worry for Emily. Meanwhile, Emily was not as fortunate. She had been grabbed by one of the neighbors, her screams echoing down the empty street as she was dragged back to her house. Inside, her captors tied her up on the couch, her struggles futile against their unnerving strength. "Why are you doing this?" she cried, tears streaming down her face. Her parents, or rather, the entities wearing their faces, ignored her question. "Where is Josh?" they demanded. "Tell me who you are and I'll tell you," Emily retorted, trying to mask her fear with defiance. In response, her parents placed an old, strange wooden box on the coffee table. It was intricately carved with symbols that seemed ancient and ominous. "This is the soul chest from our town," her mother said, her voice cold and emotionless. "Each soul in our town made an agreement many years ago. We would sacrifice ourselves to avoid persecution for witchcraft. In return, we were given new bodies to possess. You will now sacrifice your vessel to one of us." Emily's eyes widened in horror as the truth dawned on her. The residents of that small, forgotten town had made a dark pact long ago. To escape the witch hunts and persecution, they had turned to a forbidden ritual, offering their souls in exchange for immortal life in new bodies. Now the curse had caught up with them, seeking new vessels to continue its sinister cycle. Her heart pounded in her chest as she realized the magnitude of the situation. The entire neighborhood had been ensnared by this ancient curse, and now they wanted her and Josh to be their next hosts. "Please," she pleaded. "You can't do this, we're just kids." But her pleas fell on deaf ears. The smile of her parents' faces never wavered as they prepared to open the soul chest. Emily knew she had to warn Josh to save him from the same fate, but bound and helpless, she could only hope that her brother would find a way to save them both from the relentless grip of the centuries-old curse. Emily's mind raced as she saw her parents move to open the chest. In a desperate bid for time, she blurted out, "Wait, I'll take you to Josh. At least let us change together." It was a gamble, but she needed a moment to think, to plan. Her parents paused, considering her offer. Their sole focus was to find Josh and complete the ritual. Nodding in agreement, they began to lead her towards the front door. As they neared the table, holding the soul chest, Emily acted. With a swift, determined kick, she sent the table and the chest tumbling to the floor. The chest hit the ground with a thud, its lid flying open. A greenish spectral light burst forth, enveloping the room. Her parents, caught in the light, collapsed, convulsing violently. Seizing the moment, Emily dashed out of the door, leaving the chaos behind her. As she ran down the street, flickering lights emanated from each house, signaling the disruption of the sinister force. She headed straight for the park, the designated rendezvous point with Josh. But he was not there. He must have got spooked and left, she whispered to herself, a mix of disappointment and fear settling into her heart. She found a secluded spot in the trees and waited, exhaustion overtaking her. Sleep claimed her swiftly, a brief escape from the nightmare unfolding around her. A noise in the park jolted her awake. Peering from behind the trees, she saw a figure walking around the park. It was Josh. "Josh!" she yelled, relief flooding her voice. She ran towards him, her heart swelling with hope. But as she approached, Josh raised his arm and let out a loud scream, and smiled, that eerie, unnerving smile. Emily's heart sank. "No!" she cried, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. As she turned to flee, she saw the entire street converging on her, blocking her exit. The neighbors, each bearing the same grotesque smile, slowly advancing towards her. Emily stood there, trapped and heartbroken. The realization that her brother, her last beacon of hope, had fallen to the same fate as the others was devastating. She understood then that the curse was relentless, a force that consumed everything it touched. The spectral light from the soul chest had only been a temporary disruption. The ancient pact was still in force, seeking to claim every soul in its path. As the residents closed in, Emily braced herself. She knew there was no escape, that she would not give in easily. The fight to save herself and her brother had been in vain, but she would face the end with the same courage that had driven her this far. The final chapter closed on the peaceful Maplewood, now a prison of smiling faces and lost souls, a haunting reminder of the price of forgotten pacts and the relentless pursuit of immortality. And if you're still looking to fulfill your thirst for more horror, don't forget to check out this next video, unless of course you are frozen with fear already.